Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Kelly McMenamin. Welcome to Savvy Broadcasting, Life Unscripted. I'm so grateful to have you here today. How are you this wonderful Saturday?
I am doing really well. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we had a bit of a challenge getting connected, but I'm so grateful you stood there to get going with us because you're going to help our audience get organized. Organization's something that really stresses me out in my life when I don't see things kind of tidied up and secured away. But there is a difference to it. Not all organizing is equal. I mean, there's different personality types and people that do things differently. Like my husband, as we talked about beforehand, does things differently, but for him, it's very organized, but not for me. So we're going to discuss some of the ways that there's different organizational processes and different ways that people process stuff in their head and their mind, but also how can they coexist if you happen to be married with someone or living with someone that maybe is a different personality type than you and organizes differently. So I welcome to Savvy.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
You betcha. And I love the name. Where'd you get PixieDidIt, is the name of your company? Where'd you come up with it?
I started this business with, if it was me, I'm so boring and by the book. I am your typical organizer, place for everything. Everything is place. I probably would have named it like, let's get organized or something like that. But my sister, who is my opposite personality type, very creative, a creative writer, a little messy. We are the Oscar and Felix of the organizing world. She came up with it. So it's kind of the answer to who transformed your home, and it's Pixies did it. So it's kind of like magic after we're done helping you get organized. And really the genesis of the business, the whole idea of different personality types need different solutions is because of the two of us being different our whole lives. And our mom went back to school when we were teenagers and got a master's in art therapy. And we learned about Myers-Briggs personality types. So our Pixie organizing styles, Pixie types are really kind of based in the Myers-Briggs world. And we actually are Myers-Briggs practitioners. And that's the basis of all the research we did with clients and figuring out different systems for different people. And we have a book, Organize Your Way, and it's called Simple Strategies for Every Personality. That's the subtitle. And really in there is all the advice we give clients, especially the compromises between types. And that's a mainstay of our business. We have some single clients, but my joke about single clients is it's kind of like when a tree falls in a forest, do you hear it? Because usually there's not really a problem because you know where things are generally and you have your system. But the moment you layer in another personality type, whether it's a roommate or a mate, things start to get a little messier. And then if you have children or pets, it kind of grows exponentially from there. And that's usually when people call us for help coming up with systems that might work for many different personality types.
Now, I'm wondering, Kelly, because I have met some people, like a friend of mine who, and maybe it's just because of his personality type, but he doesn't seem to remember where everything is. And it's kind of, well, it looks to me thrown about. Like nothing seems to have a place. So is it maybe because he lives in a house with a bunch of other people and so he loses track or?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times if somebody, so I think we were talking earlier and I was saying you can kind of divide humanity into two types of people, and it's filers versus pilers. And that's really the first like dividing line between people. And if you are a piler and a non-piler comes and tidies your piles, because usually pilers are not messy, or not neat rather about their piles, afterwards they might not even know what's in that pile because their piles are almost visual, like breadcrumbs to them. So they might know that, for example, like important insurance document is underneath a pink piece of paper that's sticking out. So it's like these visual cues. And if I straighten it and you no longer see this pink piece of paper, then you have no idea where that insurance form is anymore. So often when there is, really like, a home with a lot of people interacting and doing things to people's stuff, you do start to lose track. And that's really why we encourage people to have formal systems, even if some of the systems are not, traditional, because once you have a system, let's say a pile, even if it's an acrylic bin that, a piler can see, somebody who's not a piler won't be as offended by it because it's in a structure And they won't try to tidy it because it's like, oh, the pile, it's there. Like it's almost like there's an organization so they can see, and so they leave it be in a way that a tidier person wouldn't do if they just saw like a big old pile,
Yeah.
without any structure, whatever to it. You just see mess. Really, that's what the tidy person sees. The filer, in the initial example of how I divide humanity, or how I've seen humanity divides itself. We always say we were kind of like, for our first 10 years, like Jane Goodall in the concrete jungles of Manhattan, because that's where our business was primarily when we started. And we really were we knew what the personality types were, the Myers-Briggs of each of our clients. And then from there, we could see strengths, weaknesses, systems that tended to happen with some types, and figured out how to formalize some of those systems. And obviously filers have a system. It's called a filing cabinet.
Yeah, right there.
The whole world is built for filers. Basically, it's like more than half the population, almost 60% of the population, whereas pilers are the other 40%. And that's kind of why 30 to 40%. And that's kind of why they're always put upon by the filers and the tidier traditional organizers. But they definitely need different systems, because it's too difficult for them, especially at home, to keep up with the idea of like filing away everything and hiding everything away. I think, one of the best ways to think about how to help a messier type, or if you are a messier type, is to make systems as close to one step as possible. And, the reason is that kind of the more steps, the more complicated an organizing system is, the less adherence you're going to get and the less you're going to do it. And, so it's kind of just accepting reality for that 30 to 40% of the population. And, an example I always give is a hamper is really a 3-step process. Like a lid, right? You gotta, like a clothing hamper, you gotta lift the lid off, put the clothes in, put the lid back down. Messy types often will just put their clothes on top, and it drives like the tidier people crazy. They're like, how big of a deal is it to open the hamper? Why can't you do that? And the answer is, it's just an extra step, really. And it's just not, it doesn't bother them to see the clothes on top of the hamper. And, they might be fine with it being that way, even if it piles up. And I just, our solution, I remember we came up with it when a client's like, oh my God, how can I get him to stop putting, clothes on top of the hamper lid? And we're like, just
Get rid of the lid
off if you don't have a lid. And it was like, like it hadn't even dawned on her, because it was like, some types are fine with the extra like lid and not seeing any mess, because you might see a little bit of the clothes in there, which might actually stress some people out. That's why they like the lid. It's why it exists, why hampers with lids exist. But really, when you think about it, which would you rather have? Because the clothes are either going to be on top of that or in there. And so it's kind of a choice for the tidier person in that type of a situation. But one step, the clothes usually go in there. And if they don't go in there, it's a lot easier for you to put them in there, the tidier person.
I love that you say that, because, we were having issues with the clothes here, and what we started to do is I'd leave the, because we don't have any white. So I would just leave the wash machine thing open, if there's not being washed or whatever, leave the thing open. You got something dirty, just toss it in there. So boom, it's ready to go right. And then
you think about it, I was just giving an example of a hamper as an individual system, but really a hamper is part of a whole laundry system. And so a hamper is the first step of many steps. So when you think about it, just using the washer as a hamper that's open is truly one step.
Yeah, right? Seriously, just throw that puppy in there. When it gets full, we push the go button.
Example, but you're in there. You're in my spiel now. I love it, because that's what I mean about the iterative process. Is you're like, well, this isn't working, and if you stop and you think, oh wait, okay, the hamper is just one part of the laundry process, and so how do I make this even simpler? So sometimes it takes you a while to find your systems. And oftentimes the clients, when I'm setting up systems, I'm kind of just interviewing them, talking about, well, how does it end up this way? What's your habits? There was one client we had, drove her husband crazy, because she would come home from work in her apartment, and it would be like a breadcrumb. She would just be like dropping her bag, then dropping her coat.
Yeah.
He's like, you could see where she was in the house based on where her stuff was. And he wanted her to put it all in the front hall closet. And I was like, it's just never going to happen. It's almost full. It's an apartment. It's, knowing what her type was, she was what we call an organic, which is a piler. Pilers are organics and smarts. And then
Now, what does that mean exactly when you say organics and
so
smarts?
an
What does that mean?
organic and a smart, they're big picture thinkers and have kind of like big picture memories as well.
Mm.
And they're just not as, they don't notice the details as much as the filers. And this is, almost like 60% of the population. And the filers in this world, we call them classics and funds.
Mm.
And they're just, they're the place for everything in its place kind of people. And they like things to be hidden away. They notice
Mhm.
little details like somebody leaving their coat on a
Yeah.
chair
Yeah.
and their purse on the floor, and these things bother them. I mean, his wife probably was like, "What?"
What's your
I didn't
problem?
even know she did that,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it's something that might bother someone. And when I saw her bag next to a bookshelf, I was like, "Is that where your bag usually ends up?" And he's like, "Yes, that's where her bag always is." I'm like, "Put a hook right there." There was a bookshelf, and there was a place in the bookshelf you could put a hook,
Mm.
and basically that's where they put the hook, and that is where she hung her thing every day because that
Mm.
was where she tended to do it. And so I literally mean, when I say do an archaeological dig, it's kind of like, oh, like that's where
Mm.
her coat tends to be. That's where her purse, like that's where you want the coat hook. I mean, you
Boom.
can try to change someone's habits, but change is always more difficult when you think about it than just going with somebody's habits and tendencies, especially at home, because when you
Mm.
walk through the door, you're usually exhausted.
Yes.
And even if you're working from home, you're usually exhausted. So, if there's another routine, the easier you can make it,
Mhm.
the better, because we tend to use our energy towards, the outside world and the demands of that. And then we're kind of in your hearth and home. It's like you
Yeah.
could be your shoes off self. And that's why it's really hard to pretend. There are some tidy people, classics and funds, who really just have trouble with the habits of messier organics and smarts. And so I'm always trying to make sure they understand it's really hard to make them change. It's not impossible, but
Mhm.
if they really demand that these people follow their systems, even the complicated more than one step ones, that messier person needs like a room or a closet that's just theirs, that they
Makes
can just
sense.
dump things, they can just toss their shoes off.
Yeah.
That the tidier person, if they find shoes, can just like toss the shoes in there.
Yeah.
So it's a great release valve, to have that. And that the tidier person can't really touch that space or have an opinion because they can
Yeah.
close the door on it. It's theirs, and it kind of helps alleviate some of the tension that is always
Mm.
going to happen between people with incredibly different brain makeups, brain
Yeah.
wiring.
Now, but let's bring kids into it because, parents will come home and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I worked all day long," and there's a pile of dishes, and the kids are like, "Well, whatever. I put some water and soap on it." Dude, how much more trouble is it to wash the damn dish? And so, what's your suggestion for getting kids on board on systems and, because
Well,
that's my
some
pet
kids get
peeve
on
too.
board right away. It's like some kids know they are a classic or a fun really early.
Yeah.
And they're the kind of ones that you can put in a system and they're like, "What? Oh, I love this idea." And they're like on board. And then there's, the other ones who are maybe going to take a little longer to figure out, what their
Mhm.
personality type is, maybe later bloomers, and people who are just going to end up the messier,
Yeah.
so, just having more stuff and not noticing it, less detail oriented. Smarts and organics.
Mm.
But I always try to make systems pretty simple for kids.
Mm.
And, like if they're not gonna be able to put it in the dishwasher, just be like, it has to be like in the sink, rinsed. Or, you
Yeah.
try again, it's kind of back to the one step idea I started off talking about, keeping it simple for them,
Mhm.
but having kind of like hard rules so that they know what the system is. Or you walk in and you be like, why are there dishes in the family room? Or,
Yeah.
where they're
Exactly.
not supposed to be. And the kids could be like, oh, sorry, and
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
and at least know what to do, like what the
Mhm.
system is. And I mean, it's iterative again. So you'll like, maybe you could start off being like in the dishwasher and over time be like, just have them rinsed in the sink.
Yeah, just put it at least rinse them off
Right.
because what ends up happening is if all throughout the day, people are taking more and more dishes and different types of items.
Mhm.
Then let's say you have a greasy meal for lunch and then breakfast was like, I don't know, like toast. Now everything is greasy and it takes much longer to clean. So I
Yeah.
try to make it, understandable to them that listen, if you just clean it at once, then it's not a lot of, it's more work at the end of the day.
Yeah.
If we can
Exactly.
just clean them and put them
Right.
off to the side, boom, and that little thing, that plastic thing that we let
And
dry thing.
you might find one kid adheres to this, one never does. And that's kind of
Exactly.
the clue of who they might end up being later in life, really, versus good or bad, if that makes sense. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
what bugs them or it doesn't bug them. But I think with kids, it is trying to keep it simple, broad, like if toys and that kind of stuff, broader
Mhm.
categories that everyone can adhere to. I definitely
Mhm.
label things because with there's, like if you have transportation, you
Yeah.
can just kind of put cars and airplanes,
Mhm.
but it kind of gives you like when you're,
Mhm.
whoever's in charge of cleaning up, because when they're really little, it's the mom or dad or the
Mhm.
babysitter or grandma. um and if you have labels and other people are interacting with it, at least kind of like keeps things in the realm of not miscellaneous.
Exactly.
Which gets chaotic really really quickly. But the piece of advice I'd give for families that kind of helps run things smoothly, this is true if you live more than just with yourself, even if it's just you and a cat or a dog, is there should be a mailroom, because every home is really kind of its own company. And
Ah.
I know it's not like a Downton Abbey type home. Most of us have pretty simple homes, but you need a mail center because things come in continually. Even after we, leave this mortal coil, there's still mail coming in. When you think about it, just doesn't stop. And so the mailroom kind of helps you, whether you're bringing in, mail's bringing it in, have places for each being within an abode. And so in addition to that stuff coming in, when you find things within that aren't in their homes and you're like, I don't know where this belongs, but it belongs to my son, I'm going to put it
Mhm.
in his bin. And the system really becomes like, I can't find this anywhere. And you're like, did you
Mhm.
look in your bin? So there's always a central hub
Ah, got
for
it.
anything. Now everything has homes, you have systems within each room. If you read our book, Organize Your Way, was this per room. So that's kind of how it's organized. It's by type, by personality type, and then by room. So every system should have its own system. Every room should have its own system. But then the central hub is kind of catches all the things, because you don't always have time to walk upstairs, right? Or go
Mhm.
to the room or go. And it's just great to be like, I don't know where this goes. I'm going to put it in their bin. And
Great
I feel
idea.
like one of the reasons it works is we all went to kindergarten and we all got a cubby. So it's like we were
Yeah.
all like kind of not brainwashed, but regardless of your type, you had a cubby. So it's like, it might not occur to somebody that it might be in their cubby, but after a while, when you're like, look in your cubby, and you're like, oh, there it is, they start to be, go back to the idea that they have a cubby. It's
Mhm.
probably in their cubby.
Yeah. Well, I love that we had this chat. I love the mailroom idea. Yeah, it's just a great idea. But also, I think you just saved an argument between me and my husband, because I saw a huge pile, and I'm like, tomorrow when he's gone, I'm gonna organize this puppy, make it, and now you just saved that from happening. I'm not gonna touch it.
Like
You're
what
like,
you could do is you could buy some acrylic bins and be like, what I'd really like to do, measure
yeah,
the
yeah.
space, that you always measure twice, but like
Mm,
measure the space, make sure the bins work, but buy some bins and be like, I'm totally fine with piles now. I just
yeah,
want them in bins. Like,
exactly.
so see how many piles he has. If it's like 5 or 6 around the house, buy more than that, because there's always 1 or 2 new piles that'll crop up.
Yeah.
And I feel like once you have that, even if the piles are not where you'd want them, you'll be a little bit happier.
Yeah, yeah, this is awesome. Well, I know you just saved a bunch of arguments across the globe. Uh,
Yay!
yeah, and also with working with your children, how to get them on board. And I think systems can maybe be fun, and maybe help all organizing styles realize, okay, here's your bin, here's your hideaway, whichever type you are. Where can people get a copy of Organize Your Way, Simple Strategies for Every Personality, get a copy of your book, and find out more about Pixies Did It and work with you guys?
Well, PixieDidIt.com. You can get, but also on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, everywhere where you can buy books online. And there's a Kindle version. You can, download that. So,
Awesome.
uh, but yeah, who doesn't want to read about organizing on a beach, right? Buy a copy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really getting jazzed up. But my husband's like, "Can we stop talking about this other girl I told you about, Kaylee?" He's like, "Oh
Yeah.
my God, stop talking about organizing!" No, no,
Why
but
you do
I.
that to me?
but
You talk about
it's,
this Pixie.
Exactly. Now, what was I going to say? If they are not in your state, can they still work with you online? Is that possible?
Yeah, I was a client that I worked with in person. She's like, how do you fit in so many clients? And I was like, well, because it's not always in person that I can talk people through it. I can see what their space looks like. I know what their personality type is, because you can go on PixieDidIt.com and take the quiz. The quiz is in the book as well, in our book, Organize Your Way. But it's also online, and it's fun. It's like, remember like taking those quizzes in like
yeah.
women's magazine. It's kind of
get me a copy.
Yeah. So you can take it, and then you know who you are. So I can work with people on Zoom and just like know their space, and we can do consulting that way.
That's great. That's awesome to know, because I've heard of quite a few of my friends hire organizers. They don't always need to be in person, especially during the whole COVID lockdown thing. A lot of people took to going within and saying, how do we make our space more, acclimatable? Yeah, exactly.
It was hard. You had to do double duty in a lot of rooms. So yeah, you can. I'm in New York. My sister's in Cleveland. So those are the in-person places in those areas, metro areas you can get us, but you can get us online. For sure.
Awesome. Well, I just have to thank you again, Kelly, for coming to share your great wisdom today. It was such a great chat. I know you're going to help a lot of our audience. Thanks for coming to Savvy Broadcasting today.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more savvy episodes and savvy biz tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.